All right. Am I in the camera?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought we'd film this for the McCracken Library. I asked Ken Stranieri at the PR office, I was like, if we film this, will you put it on YouTube? And he's like, well, what does it have to do with the McCracken? I said, nothing, but the CFM owns one of Zane Grey's guns. He said, well, that's good. All right, my name is, if you don't know, my name is Eric Rossborough, and I am the Sheriff of the Western Earth. It is October 27th, 2025, and we are here in the President's Room at the Irma Hotel for a meeting of the Governor's Room. The Governor's Room of the Pahaska Corral of Westerners. I would like to thank you for coming. I would like to thank my buddy Jeff Schrin for helping me film this. All right. So with that, I would like to open up with a question. Who here has read a novel or a book by Zane Grey? Raise your hand. Not bad. Not bad. That's more than... Who knows anything about his life? Nothing. All right, well, we'll see what we can do about that tonight. A few quick facts about Zane Grey. In the 1920s, Zane Grey outsold everything other than the Bible and McGuffey's readers. By 1920, he was making over $100,000 a year. He was the first millionaire author. Wow. Riders of the Purple Sage has been called the most popular Western of all time. Nearly 50 of his novels were converted into more than 100 Western movies. In 9 of the 10 years from 1915 through 1924, Grey had a new novel among the top best-selling novels for the entire year. So this is one of the most famous authors of the early 20th century. So I have my own personal story about my introduction to Zane Grey. I had told people that when I was a kid that my goal was to go out west and become a cowboy. I was not kidding. That is me on the left, and that is my nephew Mark on the right. I was absolutely serious about this, and I was transfixed by everything to do with the West. And so in Maine, in Booth Bay Harbor, my Uncle Ray, his family had what they call in New England a summer camp on the ocean. And so in this house, which was very salty and dominated by a kind of a sea-facing aspect, there was a whole bookcase, for some reason or other, full of Western novels. And I was too young to read them at the time, but I was completely transfixed by the covers. I would just stare at them and I was like, these guys are cool. This is like what I want to be. So anyway, my dad was not interested in the West, but he was an advertising man, and he picked up one of these books. This is exactly what happened. And he saw this ad in the back, and he said, Eric, look, so you can get 3 books for $2.29. And he thought this was hilarious. He was an advertising guy, and he loved stuff about marketing. He was always watching TV and talking about the ads you would see on TV, and he thought this was hilarious to sign me up for this book club. I was in the 3rd grade. So this went on for a while, and these books started coming in the mail, and they cost, I guess, less than $1 a piece. And so this went on for a few months, and afterwards he was like, all right, Eric, look, you're not reading these books. We're going to stop the Zane Grey book. And I was like, well, fair enough. I couldn't really dispute that. They were a little hard for a 3rd grader. Now, when I was 11 or 12, I actually read most of them, and I still have them in my bookcase. This is called Arizona Ames, in spite of the title. It's set in the Pinedale area. So anyway, that's my introduction to Zane Grey, and that I was always kind of fascinated by him, and I still have these books. So who was, here are the books. Whoops. So that's what the books look like, and this was a big thing with keeping Zane Grey popular in later years. So who is Zane Grey? Zane Grey was born in 1872. He died in 1939. His born name was Pearl Zane Grey, Pearl. And at that time, the family last name was spelled G-R-A-Y. This is not a good name to give a boy. Zane Grey's dad was a dentist, and they lived in the middle-class neighborhood in town in Zanesville, Ohio. The structure of the way the school districts were in that town was such that he was going to the school, the elementary school where all the blue-collar kids went. And his dad was a dentist, and his name was Pearl. The result of this is that Zane Grey was continually getting in fights with the kid. He had trouble making friends. And there's countless accounts by his own account of him being unruly. He was a bad student. He did not do well in school. His Sunday school teacher told him, "You are a bad boy, you are lazy, and you will meet with the hangman's noose." And so he was combative from the start. He was good. He and his brother. You'll notice that his brother. So that's Pearl, as he's called at the moment, holding the fish, and that's his brother on the right. His brother's name was Romer. They called him RC, and that was, as far as I can tell, his only close male friend in his life. He was really an isolated individual from the get-go. One of his first experiences as a kid was that his family was going on a trip, and this is in the 1880s. They were on a wagon, and they were going on a trip, and this is his account. He looked down, and he saw, they were going over a stream outside Zanesville, and they saw a fish in the stream. He said to the driver, "What's that?" He said, "It's a chub." And he said, "Could I catch it?" And he's like, "Yeah, we could catch it. We don't have time, but if you had a hook and a worm, you could catch it." And so his mother heard this and said, "Pearl, a fisherman is a lazy bad boy grown up. He never helps his mother. A fisherman is dirty and disobedient. He plays hooky and won't work. He stays away all home and is away from home all day and is never home for supper. A fisherman always carries a bottle." This didn't work. Zane Grey became obsessed with fishing. He wrote, "I liked baseball and games of risk, but such games were nothing compared to the possibilities of fishing." He became completely transfixed with fishing, as we will see. Zane Grey's father was extremely religious. He was a lay minister. Is that what you call it? A lay minister in whatever church they belonged to. He would believe in corporal punishment. He would force young Pearl to go out and fetch him snow because he liked to melt it and drink it in the winter. And Grey dated his hatred of winter from this. His dad was a dentist and wanted his son to become a dentist too, and forced him to work on Saturday cleaning dentures and forceps. He did not like this. Zane Grey was an unmotivated student. He did bad in school. He was forever getting in trouble. His reading of choice would have been dime novels, Sir Walter Scott, James Fenimore Cooper, stuff like that. Have you guys heard of those authors? Romantic stuff. Pearl and his friends built a fort out in back of their house, and they built a little hut in the woods, as boys are wont to do. His father came down there and found it, and he found a story that young Zane Grey had written called Jim of the Cave. The dad tore it up in front of him and threw it in a fire and then beat him.
Oh my God.
He had trouble getting along with school. There was one guy named, there was one guy in his town who was like, there was one guy in my town that like lived in the woods, and we called him Earthman. Do you guys have a person like that in your town? Anyway, there was a guy, and so there was a guy who was, an old guy who was always fishing, and they called him Old Muddy Miser. And the dad pointed to Old Muddy Miser and said, "Listen, you're going to end up like him if you don't learn to work and study." And so Zane Grey became friends with Old Muddy Miser, and the way that happened is they were swimming along the Muskingum River outside Zanesville, and this guy was fishing, and these boys started taunting him, and Zane Grey resolved this situation by throwing rocks at these kids and driving them away. And from then on, he and Muddy Miser were friends. And Muddy Miser turned out to be a guy that had been on some estate in town.
I get it.
No.
Ours was Anthony.
There you go. Of some estate in town, and now he was just a homeless guy who lived in an abandoned pottery barn. Nathan Bender, who's from Ohio, told me the town of Zanesville, Ohio, was a a place where they make a lot of pottery. And so anyway, this guy taught him how to fish, and this guy became Zane Grey, sort of like his, I almost want to say surrogate father figure, according to him. And he was like, listen, you've really got to make a practice of fishing. It's a viable, basically told him that fishing was a viable path in life, a viable spiritual practice. And he said, you know, have you ever heard about these fish in the ocean? Has anyone caught these fish in the ocean? I would sure like to do that. Maybe you could do it someday. I won't live long enough, but maybe you will. Anyway, so he was really into fishing. He liked baseball. He was, again, always in trouble. A financial crisis when the Greys were about 15 caused them to leave Zanesville, and they still don't know what happened. It's something, Dad got into a bad business deal and they had to leave the town all of a sudden Pearl Grey became Pearl Grey, Grey. They moved to Columbus or Cleveland, and they changed their name. Zane Grey was really good at baseball. His brother, R.C., played minor league baseball for 9 years. That's the guy on the right. And he appeared in one game for the Pittsburgh Pirates. His brother actually played in the major leagues for one day, which is, you know, more than I can tell. So Zane Grey was into baseball, and so he came up with a curveball, and he was one of the first people to throw a curveball in the area, and people were so outraged by this that he would be a ringer. Like, this is before they had televised baseball. You guys are missing the World Series games here. In those days they had town teams, so you just go watch the town team. Instead of watching on TV, you just go watch American Legion. And so he would serve as a ringer for different town teams, and that was good. And he has one story about how he basically shut these guys down as a pitcher, and then the town en masse chased him, and he had to hide in a cornfield all night. He was always getting into stuff like this. There was a young girl that he liked when he was a kid, and he was like sweet-talking her, and she said, Pearl, my mother says you're a bad boy. And he said, well, I'll be nice for you, I swear I will. So later that day, it might have been the same day, this kid beat him at marbles and took his marbles, and this was such an affront that Grey attacked this kid in the empty classroom, and they were running around the classroom. He was throwing this stuff at this other kid, and he picked up the inkwell and hurled it at this guy, and he missed him, but he hit the girl in the face. So that was the end of that romance. But we don't have, he had others, as we will see. So his dad pretty much forced him to go into dentistry, and because he was athletic, he had really good forearms, so he would go to these baseball games, and people would go to get their teeth pulled at the baseball game with him because he could do it really fast. And the dental board of the state of Ohio got a wind of this, and they were like, all right, listen, it's nice that your son wants to be a dentist as long as he goes to dental school, willing to let this slide. So he went to the University of Pennsylvania, and again, he studied dentistry. It was not what he wanted to do. Even at this point, he wanted to be a writer. He told Money Miser, was like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And he said, well, I think I'm going to be a dentist, but what I really want to do is write. And he was like, well, you can do that. This old guy really encouraged him. There's a restaurant now in Zanesville called Money Miser's, so if you want to fly me there, I'll pay. So he went to the University of Pennsylvania, and again, true to form, he got it the first day of school. He accidentally triggered a riot when he accidentally entered the upper class section of the lecture hall. He triggered a riot in which his clothes were torn off and the room was wrecked. He was there, the people at the University of Pennsylvania were aware of his baseball abilities, but in those days you didn't get a scholarship, you had to go as a walk-on. Anyway, he got into another fight where he got into a fight with a group of sophomores, and he hit one of them in the face with a potato and knocked him down. And when the coach heard this, he's like, you're on the team. So you would think because of his athletic ability and that he would have done well, but he wouldn't. He didn't really mix well with the other students at the school, and he would not drink, and he would not use tobacco, and he would not gamble. And so, I mean, if you're a college boy and you don't drink, it kind of makes it a little tough. So even though he was this college baseball star, he was kind of on the outside. Now, another thing about this guy is he came from Zanesville. His name was Pearl Zane Grey. So he was a direct descendant of a famous frontiersman named Ebenezer Zane, who had founded the town of Wheeling, West Virginia, and then headed west and founded the town of Zanesville over something called Zane's Trace. Ebenezer Zane's sister is a famous heroine in Ohio history because they were locked, these settlers were in this fort, and she ran outside under enemy fire to get the gunpowder. It was one of the last battles of the Revolutionary War, and they still talk about her. Nathan Bender, my colleague who's from Ohio, said they still talk about Betty Zane in Ohio. She's like a famous, so he grew up steeped in this Western stuff, and he was reading this romantic stuff about cowboys and things like that, but he had not really, no one had seen the West, unless you went to Buffalo Bill's show, of course. What do we got next? Okay, so he got out of school and he started a dentist practice in New York, at which point he was miserable. He would practice dentistry all night, all day, and then write in the evening. He really wanted to be a writer, and he would go fishing. So he and his brother would go out to Lackawaxen, Pennsylvania, which is a beautiful town. I'm actually enough of a Zane Grey fan that I've visited most of the sites related to him. His house in Altadena, California burned down last fall. It's gone. Anyway, so when one time he and his brother went out there to fish, and he met this woman here. Her name was Lena Elise Roth. And he confided in her that he wanted to be a writer, but in school he had been a jock who had not studied dentistry, which has nothing to do with writing, and he didn't even know basic grammar, basically. And so she'd been to college and studied English, and she sort of basically taught him basic grammar. His first 3 books were where's the book, The Spirit of the Border? That book, incidentally, might be worth something. You might want to look that up. I was joking. When I said it was only worth $1, I was kind of giving Bill a hard time, but I actually didn't look at the date. That book might be collectible. Anyway, he wrote 3 books based on a frontiersman in the Ohio River Valley. There's a famous frontiersman called Lewis Wetzel, and he put his ancestors in there, and they were 3 books. He didn't have any money, so they were paid for by Dolly, who had inherited, had a modest inheritance, and R.C., his brother, had married a woman who was wealthy. I don't know how she was wealthy, but he never had to work, and basically they paid for his first books. They did moderately well. He went in to talk to the editor at Harper's about a contract, and the guy looked at him and said, "This gives you the melodramatic idea of this guy's personality." The editor, Ripley Hitchcock, said, "Look, I don't see any evidence here that you can write narrative or fiction. I don't see any evidence of it at all." And so he walked out of the building, and he said he grabbed onto the light post. What's he going to do now? This is his whole life. I mean, I think he had some, the Boston Red Sox had wanted him to try out for them. He said no, because he wanted to be a writer. Even though he had no training, he really wanted to do this. And he said he grabbed onto this post, and he said he heard a voice that said, "They are all wrong." They are all wrong. So they decided that Dolly and Doc, okay, Dolly's pet name for, I really admire this woman. I kind of identify with her more than Zane Grey. She's a remarkable individual, as we should see. She encouraged him, and she encouraged him to basically spend money they didn't have to take a trip out west. And so he went out to the Four Corners area, and just keep in mind that at that time, people did not take trips to Arizona. You didn't go there on just a trip. There was no Phoenix metropolitan area, and people had not seen any of the western landscape. So he went out there and he went with these guys. He was really admiring of these guys who guided him, who were Mormon polygamists. But he really looked up to these guys. Am I walking out of the camera?
No, you're good.
He really walked out of the camera, and out of this came a book called, what's funny, huh?
Everything.
He wrote a book called Heritage of the Desert, which did really well, and then his next book was called Riders of the Purple Sage. This is his most famous book. The plot concerns a young woman, a young LDS woman who has inherited a ranch. She's got a boyfriend, if you call him that, who's helping her out around the ranch. There's these older elder church guys in town who want that ranch, and they're trying to pressure her to become the third or fourth wife of the bad guy. And the book opens up, I think the second chapter is these church elders beating the tar out of this guy. And so then a gunman shows up. So basically, Gray had said, I had vowed not to roast the peace-loving Mormons. That really wasn't the way it came out. That's his biggest book. It's been filmed 3 times, and there's all kinds of adventures and racy things happening. I would move that this book is a case of projection. Oh, so her pet name for him was Doc. Her name was Lena, but everyone called her Dolly. So there they are in a nice moment. So he went to Rainbow Bridge. So Rainbow Bridge was, now you can get there, it's near Glen Canyon, in Glen Canyon Reservoir, and you can get there from a short hike. In those days, it took weeks to get to, and he was just blown away by Rainbow Bridge. This guy really had a feeling for the country. And people would describe him, he would just go out and sit for like a half an hour, and just look at the landscape. And I was talking to Michael Gear about this talk, and I said, have you read Zane Grey? Because a lot of people have it now. And he said, well, the thing about Zane Grey is he puts you there. He puts you there. He has a genuine feeling for the landscape, and his early novels have this really detailed description of everything, but particularly the landscape. And the guys are all flinty and tough, and the women all have, red lips. But he really describes the landscape, and he puts you there, and he really has a really strong feeling for the country, and the West really blew him away. Anyway, Riders of the Sage blew up. It became a big hit, and from then on, the Greys were wealthy. There he is with on one of his trips with an early trip to the Southwest. So he went to Grand Canyon and all these places, and so anyway. So there's Riders of the Purple Sage. Zane Grey's movies have been filmed more than 100 times. At one point, the Greys started their own movie company. It didn't go too well, and they ended up selling out. But he was really wanting to. His movies were the first ones to be filmed on set. He had advocated for a film to be a book of his to be filmed in Monument Valley, and it was before John Ford showed up. So he was really kind of a pioneer. And if you go on YouTube, you can find all kinds of movies of his books, if that's to your taste. And Dolly negotiated sales. One thing about this guy is he kind of came along at the right time. So his wife, in those days, you could make a living as a writer by writing magazine fiction. Do you guys know about this?
Yeah.
And so his wife would negotiate that these novels would be serials in magazines. And, sorry. So his wife negotiated that these would be serials in magazines, and then he was selling books, and then movies came out. So they were making, and so in 1923 they received $15,000 for his novel Wanderer of the Wasteland, $10,000 for serialization. This is in 1923 money. His 1916 income was $27,000. His 1919 income was $95,000. His 1920 annual income was $178,000. His 1922-23 income exceeded $500,000. When his Harper's contract was renewed, it was for the largest sum ever put forth for an American author. So the plots of his books generally are a little repetitive, and they mostly concern a young man or woman who is either suffering from ennui or a lack of direction in life, or health problems, and they come out west and they find themselves. And that's kind of the plot of the book, and they're really, I would call them escapist entertainment. He would base a lot of his stuff on things that really happened, and the descriptions of his place were accurate. Keep in mind that in the pulp era, they had a lot of people, they had what they called Hudson River cowboys, which are pulp writers and artists who had never been west. And Zane Grey actually went west, and he had such a good visual memory that he could accurately describe the countryside. He wrote so many books, he was so prolific that he died in 1939, and they kept putting out new books by him once a year until I think 1961 or 62.
Wow.
The most recent book new material by Zane Grey came out in 2014, a book of fishing stories. So this guy really produced a lot of stuff, and so he was so popular. Jesse Lasky timed Zane Grey's books to be released 2 months before the movie tie-in. Like this, so this guy's a cash cow. They're making a lot of money. They were so popular that Fox Studios were doing remakes of the early movies while they were still alive. That may have been due to the advent of talkies, but all the same. Anyway. So there's other things about this guy. These ladies are named Lillian and Elma. Anyway, this is in Lackawaxen. Zane Grey would travel with women that he called his nieces or secretaries, and they did do secretarial duties, and they were often his nieces, but it was not what you would think. And he and his wife had a long courtship, and this kept going on. He was like, seemed to attract women, and they would come to his dentist office for special treatment. When he was in high school, when he was still a teenager, he was arrested in a brothel. When he was a little bit older than that, he and his dad had to go to another town to clean up a mess some young woman had gotten in the family way. This is when he was very young. So he would travel with these, and he would go on these long trips. As he became famous, he went on these really long trips where he was gone for months at a time, and he would travel with this retinue of people, and this is all real. And so basically, the way Dolly rationalized this was like, well, at least they're my nieces. I mean, she could have walked, but she really, in an odd way, they were dedicated to each other. We have a book in the McCracken called Dolly and Zane Grey, Letters from a Marriage. It's really thick. So they would write these letters to each other, and he was completely dependent on her in some sense, but he was also a compulsive philanderer. And these were not just where he was just going out for one night or the weekend. These were women that would be around for years and years. There was one woman that worked for him for 15 years. And so if you look at the pictures of in the letters book, this is real. So this is him in Florida with these 3 women. I don't know who they are, but this is how he would travel. So you have this guy who is a writer, a best-selling writer, and he's managing this stable of women. I mean, and then, okay, so that, anyway, my slides are a little disorganized here. This is Louise Anderson. This is another one of his girlfriends. So what happened was, basically, Dolly tried to keep it in the family. Like, it was like, if it was like female relatives, she knew, then it was like, well, okay. I'd like to know what she thought about this. I really kind of feel bad for her. So what happened was a movie got released in Zanesville, and so he went back and it was his triumphant return, and he's there, this cheering crowd. He's this big celebrity, and this girl, this woman that he had liked when he was a kid, who had spurned his interest, went up to him and started talking to him. He remembered her. And he wasn't quite interested in a 45-year-old woman, but he was more than interested when she suggested her daughter. So this woman's name is Louise Anderson, and this is what upset the fragile equilibrium that constituted the Grey menage, because she was an outsider. So at this point, all the other girls are pissed. Dolly goes on a trip to Europe, and she says, and they knew that in this day you did not get divorced. They knew that if this got out, that these nieces were something other, that everything would have been ruined. They were making millions and millions of dollars. And so she went on a trip to Europe, and he becomes despondent. He writes, where is it? I fear my old Penelope is at last not finding me worth writing to or loving me anymore. He wrote Dolly, I miss you like hell. Something is wrong with me. So the thing was, this guy was he was a manic depressive. He had basically what we call considered bipolar disorder today. And if you read his books, that becomes obvious because the emotions are all really exaggerated. Everything is thrilling and violent and romantic. And so he would become catatonically depressed for weeks at a time. And so one reason that Dolly put up with his continual absences, he was going on trips out west, and later, as we will see, he sort of switched to going to the ocean, but he would be gone for most of the year, and the way they communicated was by letter. He would write his books on a yellow legal pad and mail them to her, and she would clean them up. One draft. They would write a couple books a year, so he's a literary factory. If you're interested in reading Zane Grey books, I would recommend some of the earlier ones, but if you like them, you'll probably think they're all pretty good. So, anyway, so he really had a strong response to the West, but he basically didn't like anything to do with contemporary society. He did not like cars, he did not like pavement, he wanted everything, and so his idea was like, well, in the 1910 West was great, but the 1925 West was, that was just ruined by his lights. Someone had said Zane Grey has these different homes that he lived in, but if he was alive today, he would not like what had happened. We have a book in the McCracken called Tales of Fishes, I believe it's called. He has a place on he had a place on Catalina Island off the coast of California. He writes, "Go to Catalina while you still can. There's no pavement, there's no cars." He loved it. So he had a big hotel. He had a house on Catalina Island, which now is a hotel. I think it's called the Zane Grey Hotel. But he was really, and so what happened was, so I said that he was an obsessive fisherman. And as time came on, he became an obsessive he became really into deep sea fishing. So his trips, he went to Florida, he went all over the world, he went to Tahiti. So let's see if I can find. At one time, he held more than 13 deep sea fishing records. He was the first guy to catch an 1,000-pound fish, which was I am not a deep sea fisherman. In fact, I'm not anything that this guy does. But here it is. I got it right here.
True confession.
He was the first man to catch a fish weighing more than 1,000 pounds on rod and reel. In his day, he held 9 world records. I won't read those off. The records for yellowtail and yellowfin tuna have not been beaten since the International Game Fish Association became records. He was held in such high regard by fishermen that the Pacific sailfish was named for him Isotorus grayi. Hardee's in England manufactured a Zane Grey reel, while in the U.S. there was a Zane Grey bass bug, a Zane Grey steelhead fly, and a Zane Grey teaser. A fishing memorabilia auction company held an auction in the end of 2024, where they auctioned off Zane Grey's some of Zane Grey's fishing equipment. Hold on. A pregnant pause here. Oh, I can't find it. Oh, here it is. So, Ed Zern of the, from Field and Stream basically said Zane Grey was the best fisherman of all time, and he did what any fisherman who had $1 million would do, spend it on fishing. He was a profligate so he stayed in really good shape and was really serious about fishing, true to old Muddy Mauser's prediction. He once spent 86 days fishing off the coast of Australia without catching a fish. So another interesting thing about these girlfriends of him is if you were going to like go out with him, you would be on a pack trip, and the pack trips did not last 7 days. He would go for months, and then he would be on a ship at sea. So so the women that would take up with him were kind of adventurous in their own right. They had to be roughing it a little bit, and whether you would be showering or eating good food, he was really focused on fishing. So you have this guy who is a best-selling author, one of the best fishermen, sport fishermen of the 20th century, and a bizarre womanizer. Like, it's really odd. And one reason that Dolly put up with all this is that he was, that his depressive moods, as I said, he was bipolar, and that he become catatonically depressed and basically moving around a lot. She thought helped him function. But he was never home. She basically raised their children by herself. Zane Grey's son, Lauren, said that he'd only spent one entire day with his dad without other people around in their whole life. So, all right. So his death coincided with the advent of the paperback boom. So you have, when he started out, his early novels were, his early writings were for outdoor magazines, fishing stories and hunting stories. He was mainly a fisherman. He liked to hunt, but he mainly was a fisherman too. And so it's interesting to think without Dolly, he would have been a dentist who fished in the weekend and freelanced for outdoor magazines. So anyway, you have the magazine industry being big when he starts out. Then you have the movies. Over 100 movies have been made of his books. Then you have the first paperback copy of one of his books came out in 1939, the year of his death. So that blew him up for another 30 years, basically the 40s and 50s and 60s. Remember I told you about my uncle's house? Zane Grey books were everywhere, and so they were very popular. He was not eclipsed as the most popular Western author of all time until Louis L'Amour. And if you read them, they're very different. Zane Grey's novels are formula stories. They always end in marriage. They always end in marriage. And I really think this whole thing about having these girlfriends, a lot of times creative people are dependent on they don't know how to be creative except in a certain way. Like they can't be creative unless someone's mad at them. They can't be creative unless they feel like they're drinking, and they feel like they have to have something. And if you read his books, they're just these really overwrought emotions. So when I was a kid, I told you my dad said, sign me up for the Zane Grey book club, and my sister Cynthia said, well, what do you think of those books? I said, well, the action's okay, but the romance is sad. She was like, what's your problem with romance? 9 years old. So I interviewed Don Schmaltz. You guys know Don Schmaltz, the outfitter?
Yeah.
So I interviewed Don Schmaltz, and I said, how is it that you wanted to become a cowboy? He said, well, when I was a little kid on a farm in North Dakota, I would read Zane Grey novels with a flashlight under my covers after I was supposed to have gone to sleep. And I said, well, I read those books when I was a kid too. I said, what did you think of them? He said, oh, I loved them. I said, well, I thought they were pretty good except for the romance. I thought that was completely distasteful to me. He said, well, you must have been married a long time when you read those books. Anyway, so what else do you want to know? So basically, so what I would say about this guy is that his books are good, but he's really the more interesting character. And what's happened was Zane Grey was dumped on really severely in his time by the critics. He really remained a man apart his whole life. As far as I can tell, his only real friend was his brother Romer, who basically hung out with him all the time. It didn't seem like he would travel with this retinue, but I don't really get the idea that he bonded. A lot of times when people would meet him, they said he was stilted and reserved, that he would not talk very much. He was a very quiet guy. There's actually a movie I found on YouTube last night. It's called White Death. And it's got Zane Grey in it. It's about Zane Grey trying to catch a shark off Hawaii or Australia. And it has him talking, so that was really great to hear him talking. But he's very quiet and low-key, and there's all these people moving around, and he travels with this huge retinue. He was not good with money. He was blowing a lot of if you read the correspondence between Doc, as she called him, and Dolly, a lot of they're arguing about money. He did not have any concept of money, just as he did not have any concept of hurting people's feelings. And at one point, they were bankrupt. And one thing that happened was one of his secretaries had hitchhiked when she was younger, and so she had written this up into a book, and it didn't do well. And he's like, well, I'll help you. He gave her tips. He would try to help people. And he rewrote this, and they sold it to a magazine, and then she was like, well, where's my money? And Dolly just made the whole thing go away. I think she gave her a car. That was the end of that. But at one point, they were completely bankrupt, so he would buy these, so there he is there's all these pictures of him with these huge, huge fish. He bought a succession of boats. This ship is called the Fisherman. So he bought this, and he spent their millions as fast as they could. And at one point, they were completely bankrupt. In the 30s, everything really went downhill financially. What she had done was, without telling him, she had put away 50% of their earnings. I will say there, because he wouldn't have amounted to anything without Dolly. Put 50% of the earnings away without his knowing, for herself and the children, their 3 children. And so what happened was, when they were going to go under, she came up with this money, and then they formed Zane Grey Incorporated, which still exists today. And the idea with that was, now Zane Grey's a board member, but he has to answer to the other board members, so he can't be spending as much money. So he was, I kind of feel like one of the people that had studied Zane Grey for a long, long time said I always came up a little short. Like they said, I never really could figure out what the deal was actually with this guy. I mean, based on what I've said so far in the last 30 or 40 minutes, have you ever heard of anyone like this at all? No. I mean, like, okay, you're going to manage 4 girlfriends at a time, and then go on deep sea, and then be a major deep sea fisherman, and then the biggest selling author in the world. This is a real, and how did he have the time or energy for all this? Anyway, so basically, what else is there? What happened was the book Old Man in the Sea was considered to be based on something that actually happened to Zane Grey. Have you guys read Old Man in the Sea? That happened to Zane Grey. He would be gone. He and Dolly would see each other for a few days a year. And so in the later years of his life, they had some harder times in relative terms, but she was a financially the adult where he wasn't. If someone asked her about him, he said, "Oh, he lives in a land of make-believe." Another time she wrote him when she was really mad at him. He said, "You are a genius writer. I think you're a genius. You're a great fisherman. It's amazing how you can string all these women along. As a husband, you are a punk." So in 1937, Zane Grey had a stroke. At this point, he's in his early 60s. And he couldn't fish anymore. He couldn't talk. At that point, he started dictating his books. They were cranking these books out, and apparently it wasn't just for the money, because, as I said, they continued to put books out for a long, long time after his death, and they're all new material. And so he went up on the roof of his house in Altadena. They had moved to Southern California and the teens to be near. She had moved them out there to be near the movie industry. What else? And he liked it out there because he could fish off Catalina when he was home. So he went up in his house in Altadena and he started practicing casting with this one of these huge deep sea fishing rods. This guy's determined to fish. It's like him sitting, and it's like half the length of this room. He's got more fishing tackle than I have stuff. Like it's all these giant deep sea fishing rods. Anyway, he practiced and practiced on the roof of his house casting this rod. They went to Australia and he caught a fish, and it was like, so if you want to be a serious deep sea fisherman, you have to be in really good shape. You'll see that if you go back up here, you can see that he's pretty fit. This is a pretty fit looking guy. This is not a disciplined individual, whatever his flaws. So he caught this fish, and he fought it for 8 hours, and everyone was telling him, don't do it, you knock it off, and he wouldn't. And that after that, he was never the same. So there he is on the set of Wild Horse Mesa. So at that point, he died, that was in 1970, died in 1939. Here he is on the set of Wild Horse Mesa. Now in the 1990s, to give you an idea, I really don't feel like, for all I've said, I really feel like I've gotten to the bottom of this guy, and I don't think that I can. I've been fascinated by him my whole life, but I'm nothing like him. Like, I don't think I would necessarily want to hang out with him. But he had this, so when I worked at the Getty Center in Southern California in the 1990s. And so at the library there, one thing they let you do is sign out books that you liked and keep them. You never really had time to look at them. So I signed out the catalog resume of Frederick Remington by Peter Hassard. And there was in some poetry magazines, and also a book called The Western Motion Picture by Zane Grey, which is a limited run book. It had a canceled check from Gray's brother Ellsworth, signed by Zane Grey, and it's about a short essay about his experiences in the motion picture industry. And what he says is these people who become big stars start out on my movies, and then they, they want to move on. They want to move on to like real, like more serious movies than mine. Like he honestly couldn't understand why the movie actors would want to do something more than play out these romanticized stories, which are not particularly realistic. If you read his books, his knowledge of this guy's knowledge of human psychology is not good. The women are all beautiful. There's good men and there's bad men, and it's all really obvious from the get-go. Here he is writing. He wrote, as I said, he wrote by longhand, and then he would mail the manuscript to Dolly, who would clean it up and publish it. So these books were cranked out. Here he is on the road. Oh, that's him and Dolly in old age. Or not old age, but older. I kind of identify. I really think she's an amazing individual. Here he is on the Rogue River. This is later in his life. One thing was his kids started getting to high school, and one of his kids started cutting up, and remembering his own youth, he decided to stay a little closer to home. So for him, that was Oregon from Los Angeles. And so he had a cabin up there. That cabin's still there, and he would fish up there. But so the last day of his life, he was in Altadena, and he went to Vroman's Books in Pasadena. I think it was still there when I lived there. And he signed copies of his novel Western Union and chatted with his fans. And then he went to bed. And the next day they got up in the morning. He spent the night with Dolly. He got up in the morning and he had a heart attack. And Dolly sent one of the kids for a doctor, but that was it. He was 67 years old. His last words were, "Dolly, don't leave me." So if you can pick a thread through that, I salute you. You guys have any questions about Mr. Grey? questions about Zane Grey?
Eric,
Yes.
didn't he write a book about the Anasazi?
Yeah, I think he did. The
It was
question
like a
is, did
sci-fi
Zane, I think he did. Did he write a book about the Anasazi? I think he did. This guy was so prolific that his books of fishing stories would constitute a regular author's entire body of work. He has like 7 books on fishing stories, and they're all this long. What he would do is he would travel around different parts of the West and get it in his head and then use that. For example, he hired, have you guys heard of the gun writer Elmer Keith? Elmer Keith. Okay, so Elmer Keith has a book called Hell, I Was There.
Right.
Elmer Keith is the un-Zane Grey. Have you read that book? Yeah, no, it's very entertaining. I highly recommend Hell, I Was There by Elmer Keith, but he was working as a guide in the Salmon River area, and he talks about Zane Grey hired him to go on to guide him down the Salmon River so he could use it, and he based his novel Thunder Mountain on this. Elmer Keith described the trip as a 3-ring circus. And he was also a little puzzled by why he needed 3 secretaries. What other questions?
What happened with his kids?
He had 3 kids. He had Betty Zane, named after the thing. I don't know what happened to her. As far as I know, she lived a stable existence. He had a son named Lauren, who became a professor of psychology at Cal State Northridge and did very well for himself. And he had another son named Romer, who was named after his brother. And Romer wanted to get into the movies doing animation and did a few things, but it didn't really take off. And I think one thing I think is really tough is that if you have a father that's really, my dad was successful at, not like this. I mean, if you call this a success, you might think he's not. But that it can be kind of tough. And Romer ended up living by himself in the Altadena house and managing Zane Grey Incorporated, and I think he became an alcoholic. But there's descendants, and there's a Zane Grey's West Society, and the descendants go to they have a yearly convention, and people from his family will show up. As far as I know, Zane Grey was a one-off. I have no reason to think that his brother Romer was anything other than a steadfast, stable husband, or that I don't know if there's any history of depression in other family members, but he definitely was a bipolar person. Yes, Linda.
Yeah, I'm only familiar with his Western cowboy kind of books, like Riders of the Purple Sage. Did he ever was he ever a cowboy?
The question was, Linda has read some of his books, but was he ever a cowboy? The answer was basically no. What would happen was, early on, he would go on these trips and they would kind of save their money, and he would go along and he would be camping and riding, but he wasn't ever a cowboy. He would just go out from Pennsylvania, where they lived at that time, and then come back and write it up. The answer is no, but he was around, he certainly got eyewitness observation of these people, and you can tell that in the books. But as he became wealthy, I told you Elmer Keith called his outfit a 3-ring circus. His trips became very opulent, where they traveled in all this luxury. I mean, where's that ship? I mean, how much do you think that cost? So the answer was not really, but he did do his research, and he was an athletic guy. Any other questions about Mr. Grey? Are you guys going to go out and join the Walter J. Black Zane Grey Book Club?
We know everything, we don't need to.
I really think this guy is he's an original. And I don't think, there's no evidence that anyone in his family or was like, have you ever heard of anyone like this? Like the things I just laid out, it's like, what? Anyway.
Does his cabin still exist in Arizona?
Does his cabin still exist in Arizona? No. It burned down in the 1980s or 90s in the town of Payson. He spent a lot of time on the Mogollon Rim. And so the town of Payson, they have the Zane Grey Museum there, and they built a replica of the cabin. They had the plans. So you can go see the cabin. I went to see it, and there's a Zane Grey Museum in Payson. There's a Zane Grey Museum in Payson, Arizona. There's a Zane Grey Museum in Lackawaxen, which is owned by the Park Service. And there's a Zane Grey Museum in Zanesville, Ohio. And again, and then there's the house, the cabin in Oregon, which is still there. A friend of mine that worked for the Forest Service used to camp out next to it. That's still there. And then his house in Altadena burned down last year. Yes,
So he had 3 sons?
he had 2 sons. He had 2 sons, Lauren Romer, and a daughter named Betty Zane.
3, and so he was married?
Yeah, he wouldn't leave his wife. No, he wouldn't. One thing that would happen was, so he would write letters to Dolly about these problems with these girls he was stringing along. And one thing that would happen is they would leave. They would leave because he wouldn't marry them. And so
But he was already married.
he was like, if they think I'm leaving my wife, they're crazy.
She's the money system person.
He felt like when she got really angry with the advent of the woman from Ohio and she went on a trip to Europe, he was like this completely despondent. He didn't know how he was going to make it alone.
Maybe they didn't get married.
Any other questions? Yes.
There was a slide in the beginning of the 2 cowboys with you and your cousin.
Yes.
Oh,
Whoops. Yeah. Oh, wait, hold on.
oh,
That?
what's going on with his shirt there, and what's he doing pulling out of the shirt?
Who, me or
No,
Mark?
the other guy.
He's holding a gun.
Yeah, that's-
gun.
I think it's a
water
pistol.
Water pistol.
That's my nephew Mark. It's at Christmas time one year. That's
He's a real
the
cowboy.
basement of our house in Wayland, Massachusetts. If you call those real cowboys, I'll take it. I had brown hair in those days. All right, what else?
So did I.
Yeah, what else? All right, well, anyway, I'd encourage you to read up on Zane Grey and read some of his books. He's a fascinating character. And remember that you guys are all here because of the Westerners. You guys are many of you moved to Cody from elsewhere. This guy is a significant driver in the development of Wild West mythology as much as Buffalo Bill. I mean, really is really big in terms of, this was not as developed a thing. The Western tropes were a large part developed by Zane Grey. All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.